Hello everyone, welcome to another installment of the Introductory Lecture Series. As always, I'm Professor Zaldivar, and today we'll be talking about Judith Jarvis Thomson's essay on abortion. To begin the discussion, I want to point out that there's a sort of underlying principle that Thomson is making use of throughout her discussion, which is to say that she highly values um, the principle of autonomy or the right of autonomy. We saw this before in the essay on drug use or the illegality of drugs and prohibition of drugs. And when someone values the right of autonomy, what they're saying is that adults are very much entitled to doing things, doing whatever they'd like, and to having um, complete control over their own body. Keep that in mind as this discussion continues, because you'll be able to see how it impacts her position. Okay, um, so her argument basically starts with the willingness to take on an initial claim that nothing can be done to end a fetus's life. In other words, abortion is impermissible even to save the mother. Under all circumstances, it is wrong to terminate a pregnancy. Now, there's a response to this, which is namely, doesn't anyone have the right to defend themselves in the face of impending death? So, if someone is attacking you, don't you have the right to defend yourself? And if you can only defend yourself by killing them, then doesn't that give you the right to kill them? Don't we just call this self-defense? And the answer seems to be yes, that is what we call self-defense. And yes, people do have a right to protect their own life. And while it's regrettable and no one wants to, if protecting your life can only be accomplished by killing someone else, then you are morally entitled to kill the person. Well, in the case of some pregnancies, due to complications and health risks, the mother's life is indeed in danger. The pregnancy is potentially fatal, and sometimes definitely will be fatal to the mother. So if the mother's life is in danger, doesn't she have a right to protect her life by having an abortion? Thomson uses the example of an expanding baby to illustrate this point. So if you think that's right, or if you agree with her, notice sometimes students will say, well, but the baby is innocent. As we will see in the Jane English discussion, whether a person is innocent or not actually doesn't have very much impact on the question of self-defense. Okay, so assuming you're on board with the argument so far, or at least you're following along, you might think, okay, the initial position simply needs to be amended. And now we can argue that nothing can be done to end the fetus's life unless the mother's life is at risk. However, no third party can interfere, which is to say, the question of self-defense and the morality of self-defense only applies, the only people who can act are the mother and the fetus. No one else can go in there because both the mother and fetus have an equal right to claim. And when two people have equal rights, then there's no way to decide there's no moral way to justify favoring one over the other because they have equal rights. But Thomson says a response could be offered, but certainly third parties are able to interfere if one of the two original parties has a just claim or has a more deserving claim. In other words, if two people are having a dispute and they have absolutely equal rights, then no one else can come in and pick one over the other person because the two people are equal in their standing. But if the two people in dispute have unequal rights, one is more deserving or more correct than the other one, then of course a third party can come in and side with the more deserving person. So, for example, if a friend and I are walking down the street and we find a jacket and we both want to pick it up and we both want to take it home and we get into a fight over it and a police officer shows up, he has really no way of deciding who should get the jacket, right? Because we both found it. It doesn't belong to either one of us originally. We both have equal right to claim it. Now, If I'm wearing a jacket and it's my jacket and I put it on and leave my house and I'm walking along the street with my friend and my friend decides that he wants my jacket and tries to take it from me and we get into a fight over it and a police officer shows up, clearly the police officer has the ability and in fact has the obligation to stop the fight and to give me back my jacket. In other words, where in the first situation the officer has no way of knowing, no way of deciding who should keep the jacket, in the second situation the officer has a clear way of deciding who should keep the jacket, the original owner, me. So, in the case of an abortion, if we have two people with equal rights to life, the mother and the fetus, how can we decide who gets to live? Some people might say you can't. No one else can. No one else has the ability to jump in on one side or the other. But then you say, but the mother also has a right to her own body, to use her body as she sees fit. And so therefore, she has an extra right. She not only has the right to life, which she has also, not just the fetus has the right to life, they both have a right to life. She also has the right of autonomy, the right to use her body. And so therefore, a doctor has a reason to interfere to protect her rights. She, in fact, in this case, has greater rights, has more rights in play than the fetus. So we have to amend the claim again. But Thomson's antagonist might say, still, this only justifies abortion if the mother's life is at risk. So if we grant that if the mother's life is at risk, she's entitled to an abortion to protect her life, and she's entitled to assistance by doctors to protect her autonomy, then all this is true, but only if the mother's life is at risk. And if the mother's life is not at risk, then it looks like she has no moral standing to have an abortion. There's, of course, a response to this. The basic statement of response is no one has a right to force someone else to use their body in some way. So in other words, I don't have a right to force someone else to use their body in a way that they don't want to. So consider that, let's say I have an unusual disease and I need Tom Cruise to put his hand on my forehead in order to save me. Well, I deserve to live. I have a right to life. Putting his hand on my forehead will not risk Tom Cruise's life in any way. It will not be harmful to him in any way. So some people might say, I deserve to live, and therefore Tom Cruise should put his hand on my forehead. But if Tom Cruise doesn't want to, then I don't have a right to kidnap him or to force him to put his hand on my forehead, to force him to use his body in some way that I'm not comfortable with. So, a fetus, even if a fetus is entitled to life, and certainly every living thing is entitled to life, it is not entitled to force a mother to use her body in a way that she does not want to. And because of this, it could be argued that abortion is basically always justified. Because anytime a woman wants to end a pregnancy, forcing her to continue with the pregnancy would force her to use her body in a way that she doesn't want to. Now, sometimes we can respond to this by saying, well, the woman chose to have sex, and she knew what the consequences were, and so she can't abandon her consequences after the fact. For example, when you go gambling and you put down some money, you know you could lose it, and if you lose the bet, you don't get to say, oh, I changed my mind, I want to keep my money. When you have unprotected sex, you know you could get pregnant, and when you do get pregnant, you don't get to say, oh, I changed my mind, I don't want my body to be used in this way. And this is a sort of compelling, an intuitively appealing line of argument. The problem is that it conflates causal and moral responsibility. There's a difference between saying, I did certain things to put myself in a position to have something happen to me, and being morally responsible for what happens to me. I'll give you some quick examples. If I take a shower and fall down and break my head and die, I have causal responsibility for that, right? In other words, I chose to take a shower. I got into the shower. I turned on the water. I took a step. I did all the things that I needed that put me in a position to slip and fall. So I'm causally responsible. But am I morally responsible? It doesn't look like it. It looks like I didn't commit suicide there. Um, Again, a quick example. Let's say I am driving my car and I'm good about upkeep and my car is well maintained and there's no mechanical problems as far as I know. And I'm driving my car and I lose control of it through no fault of my own. Um, and I ram into another car and cause a person in that car to die. I'm causally responsible for that death, or at least partially causally responsible for that death, because I got in my car and I drove down the street and I chose to do these things. And if I hadn't done these things, I would not have been in a position to ram the other car. But I'm not morally responsible, right? I didn't just commit murder. So someone who has sex in a way which is intended to prevent pregnancy, for example, using um, protection, contraception, maybe even multiple forms of contraception, would seem to bear some causal responsibility for a pregnancy, right? For unintentional pregnancy. Clearly, they chose to have sex, etc. But it doesn't look like they intended to get pregnant. It doesn't look like they have more responsibility. In other words, getting pregnant when you're trying not to seems to be a lot like falling in your bathroom. Because after all, everyone going into a bathroom knows that they're taking the risk in their life in their own hands. The bathroom is the greatest, has the highest number of deaths of any room in the household. It's the place you're most likely to die inside your own house. So everyone knows you step into the bathroom, you're stepping into a kill zone. But no one wants to die when they do it, and we don't hold them morally responsible. So if you're having sex, but you don't want to get pregnant, and you're being responsible and trying to avoid it, you're using contraception, etc., then it looks like it could be argued that's a little weird to hold you morally responsible. Alright, that concludes our Thomson lecture. Do, as always, go read the essay, because there's a lot more information in there than I have time to cover in these lectures. Thanks very much for listening.